Here we go. So we are joined for our first guest of our 2025 spring semester by Rochelle Ballantyne, all the way from New York City, litigation associate at Sidley Austin there in New York City, star of the 2012 film Brooklyn Castle and chess expert. We thank you so much for taking some time for us today. I've got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson High School. It's our business law class. We're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools. Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, Madison Central High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for starting the semester off for us.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome. Now, before we get into all the cool things you do and the things you have done, originally from New York, went to Stanford
Yes.
University all the way out in California, then went back across to the East
Yes.
Coast, went to Columbia University, and then got a law degree at New York University. So just take us through uh, your college pathway and what it went into those decisions, because that's three of the most incredible universities on the planet.
Yeah, I'm really blessed that I was able to experience all three, learn so much from those institutions, and just met the most incredible people. For Stanford, I applied through the QuestBridge program. So I come from a low-income single-parent household, and so the only way that college was a feasible path for me was through scholarships. And so I spent a lot of my junior and senior year of high school just scouring for all of the potential scholarships that I was applicable for, and found a QuestBridge and applied and then got matched to Stanford University. And so was able to attend on a full
Wow.
ride.
That's incredible. And I'm glad you mentioned that too, because we have a lot of kids that say, look, my family can't afford to send me to college. And then they're shocked their senior year when they find out how much unused scholarship money goes every year. And it is literally in the millions. So the money is there. It takes a little effort to
Yes.
find it, to write a little something and
Yes.
work a little harder. But if that is something you want to achieve for yourself, it can be done. Now, after you graduated Stanford,
Absolutely. Not stressed
went
enough.
back to New York,
Mhm.
went back to New York and went to Columbia, which is an Ivy League school there in New York,
Yes.
and then went to NYU. So take us through that process because that's two more incredible schools there in New York City.
Yeah, and two more degrees. I always knew that I wanted to be a lawyer, but I think after Stanford, I wasn't sure if law was the right path. I think because of the
Yeah,
mentors that I met while I was there, they kind of told me that, the things that you're interested in, you might be able to still do from a policy perspective as opposed to a legal
yeah.
perspective, and definitely a lot less debt. And so I went to Columbia to get my master's in education policy to see if I could still achieve some of the same things that I was interested in without the law degree. But it turns out my education program, most of my professors were lawyers, and so ended up in law school anyway.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned the policy. We're actually having somebody. We're having a couple people that work in policy later on in the semester, and that is another great area to get into, especially if you really have a heart for serving your community. And we'll talk about that later on this semester. But I'm glad you mentioned that, and we'll come back to that. Now, when you talk about you're an attorney, a litigation associate, you deal with a lot of
Yes,
commercial litigation, and I have a lot of teenagers with me that
yes,
may not understand exactly what that means. We've gotten into this class and we talked about just because you deal with an attorney doesn't mean you're going to jail. Just because you're dealing with an attorney, it's not going to be like Law and
yes,
Order. We all watch the courtroom
yes.
dramas and we love them, but that is just a minuscule part of what attorneys do. People like yourself, they're there to help people in the community. They're there to settle disputes. They're there to uh, uh, not only negotiate but translate a contract. A lot of people, unfortunately, get into situations where they don't understand the paperwork they've been given. So, talk about how attorneys like yourself work with a litigation in the commercial world and the employment world. So, because it is something that can be a service to someone once they become a working adult.
Yeah, absolutely. So I I'm still trying to figure out what it is I do. I'm learning something new every day. But I think it's mostly akin to suits, except not as glamorous. So if any of the students watch Suits. It's a bit similar. So that's a lot of what I do is mediating disputes between businesses and clients that come to us, trying to understand the legal landscape and a lot of kind of like, if you have a phone bill and there's a lot of fine print, like what does that mean? Like what is it that you're signing up
Yep.
for when you sign something? So a lot of you are about to apply to college, so the fine print, like when you sign a scholarship or when you sign a loan, reading what it is that means. And so that's a lot of what I do is reading the fine print to make sure that my clients understand what it is that they're going through. And so, yeah, so I don't deal with, I try to avoid dealing with jails just because of my background and where I grew up. I grew up with like very close to a lot of the people around me being involved in the prison industrial complex. And so I spend a lot of my pro bono work focusing not on people who are in jails, but preventative measures to prevent people from going to jails. And so for me, that starts with education and making sure that my clients have an equal access to educational opportunities that are able to achieve some of the things or more of the things that I have been lucky to achieve, whatever path that looks like for them. And so I'm grateful that I'm able to do that work and put my law degree to work in that realm, especially because I grew up here. And so giving back to my community in that way means a lot to me.
Yeah, and a lot of times dealing with an attorney is a preventative measure for things that may happen. If you want to open a business, I think you're absolutely outside of your mind if you don't deal with some sort of attorney. No matter what the fee is, that's a small price to pay because you want to make sure your building is up to code. You want to make sure you have all your fire safety. You want to
Yes.
make sure you have the right licenses to open that business in your particular city or state. You want to make sure you have all your employee rights up and everything because that can avoid you millions of dollars down the line to spend a few thousand up front to deal with an attorney to make sure all of your legal paperwork is in order.
Absolutely. I think it's such a skill that we forget as just common day working class people is just all of the numerous laws and hidden laws that we're not aware of, that lawyers literally spend day in and day out just making sure that they're up to code on so that we can advise in the best way possible. So yes, a little far off for the high school students, but for sure, when you're about to like sign on to loans and scholarships, please, 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 you don't have to consult a lawyer, but just make sure you're reading everything twice so that you know exactly what you're signing on to.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, and I mentioned this already. We have a couple of students in here with me that are absolutely obsessed with the game of chess. And one of them I mentioned for our
Yeah.
entrepreneurship class did come up with a business concept to teach chess to the users in an app. So just talk about your chess journey because you've made international news, trying to become the first black woman in United States history to be a chess master. And hey, Black History Month's right around the corner. So I think this is not only a great story for that, but just really inspirational because one thing I always say, and everybody that's here has heard me say this, just because you're the first person to do something doesn't mean you can't be the best person to do it as well. And I just think that says a lot about what you've done and what you've accomplished. So just tell us how you got into chess at such a young age, and now really a big advocate for chess for girls and in the Black community.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started playing chess because my grandmother taught me. And she it was kind of like her way of kind of like calming a very rambunctious 8-year-old. And she would like win all the time, and that was very frustrating to me because I hated to lose. And so that was just kind of her way of like keeping me engaged. And then I learned that there was a chess program in my elementary school. And so I joined it just so that I could defeat her in chess, which is a pretty petty thing to do, but look where I'm at now. So, it all worked out. Um, and so I think what kept me playing was kind of just that drive to win, and then also there are a lot of things that I didn't know the places that chess could take me. And so
Yeah.
before chess, I've never left Brooklyn or the five
Wow.
boroughs. And being able to play chess allowed me to travel all over the world, meet all kinds of people, really help with my advocacy skills because I was like one of the only Black women, or if not the only Black girls in the room. And so being able to stand up for myself and be like, I belong here, I deserve to be here. And not only that, I can beat you in chess. So um, I think the confidence, the ability to communicate with others, even with differing views. I've learned so much, or the person who I am today is because of the little girl chess player that I was when I was younger. And I'm so grateful to her and the people along the way. But again, I think even still playing chess, I'm still one of few or handful. And so I really want to make sure that Black girls and girls in general are aware of the pathways that chess can take you. Um, if you like watch the movie, you'll see that I won a chess scholarship because of chess. And
Wow.
like again, unheard of, right? Um, there are just so many different ways to like access college that you just aren't aware of. And I didn't know that chess was one of those avenues. And being able to travel the world again, like just incredible experiences, being able to
Wow.
represent America in like world youth. Yeah, just what a beautiful game, right? And obviously, because I was Black, or because I'm Black and because I'm a woman, there's a lot of like negative components of chess as well. Um, just the isolating feeling of being only. But again, like reminding myself that I belong to be here, that I'm just as good. Um, yeah, and so like those are the messages that I try to make sure that I instill in new players is to just remind them that, it's a very hard game. Like chess is it's a very hard game. But once you get the hang of it, the places that it can take you, just like any other sport, it doesn't have to be chess, just any other extracurricular, and it looks so good on your college applications. And so I encourage everyone to find something that you love and just stick with it. It doesn't have to be chess, it could be anything, but just that dedication to something that means a lot to you just says so much about your character, and will be beneficial wherever you go.
Yeah, and you should have seen the reaction around the room when you said chess is a hard game. It was like, oh yeah, yeah. And the movie, and again, the movie you were speaking of was the 2012 award-winning documentary Brooklyn Castle, which featured your middle school chess team and y'all's trip to nationals. But I think you make a great point there
Yes,
because something that I noticed as a teacher, and I think I can speak for a lot of teachers when I say this, a lot of not just black kids, but a lot of kids in general think the only way they can make it is to be a celebrity, to be a superstar athlete. But there are so many avenues that did not exist decades ago, you know, especially in rural black communities. And I was interviewed by a magazine last year when I talked about this. I said things are available now that weren't available 20 years ago. There's scholarships for everything you could imagine. So the opportunities are there, but just because you don't fit into the cliche doesn't mean you can't be very successful in business, in law, in academics, or whatever field you want to go. And I think your journey in chess is such a great example of that.
absolutely. Thank
Um,
you so much.
now,
Yeah, I
yeah,
100%
yeah.
agree.
Yeah, and all the success you've gotten is well deserved. Now, before I get to the students' questions, one thing that I like to talk to any legal expert about this because even if a kid has no desire to ever be an attorney or even be an entrepreneur, we have a lot of really skilled kids here, and they all have different paths, and that's fine. But one thing you hear about in the news, unfortunately, and this is not just in one area, you hear all the time about how employees are taken advantage of, and it's because they don't know their rights as an employee. So, what are some common things you see that people either knowingly or unknowingly have been hurt because they don't know their rights as an employee when they go into the workplace?
Yeah, I think workers' rights is very important. Not my field per se. So,
Yeah.
and it also depends per like for employment. But I think
Yeah.
if you are Black and brown, if you're an immigrant, if you come from a low income background, I think just recognizing that whenever you sign up for a job, there are federal rights that every employee has to agree to. And one of those rights is that you can't discriminate based on race, and you can't discriminate based on gender. And so also sexual harassment, like you cannot, if you get into a compromising position, you're allowed to report that without fear of retaliation. And so those are the big ones that I always recommend people just be aware of, because I think like growing up in a predominantly white, or not growing up, just existing in predominantly white areas, it's easy for you to just listen to what someone else says, because you think they know better than you. But their experience is different than your experience. And if somebody makes you feel uncomfortable, listen to that, lean into that. And tell somebody, because your intuition could be right. Um, so yeah, I think that's all I'll say, because I'm not allowed to give legal
Yeah,
advice.
yeah, no, absolutely. And the the word I always use is businesses have to make what's called reasonable accommodation. So I've had people,
Yes.
In Mississippi, there was a big case a few years ago where a worker was told she couldn't work somewhere because she was a Pentecostal and wanted to wear a skirt, and the employer said she had to wear pants. And luckily, she knew her rights and sued the company and won. So things like that, don't let that deter you from being a great employee. Don't let that deter you from the rights that you have just because you don't know it. This is the time to learn these things and be aware of. And another big one is a lot of women know they're entitled to maternity leave. Uh, Now, unfortunately, in the
Absolutely.
United States,
I think
it's
what's
not
more
required to be paid
specific.
for it.
Yeah, exactly. But what I was going to say is that I think something that's more specific to high school students, is knowing your rights, and especially Black high school students, is knowing your rights when it comes to police officers. I think that is pivotal, especially in the climate that we're in, is just making sure that um, you know what it is police officers are and are not allowed to do if you're ever put into a situation with them. Okay, like I just cannot stress that enough. And I think something else is I work a lot in education rights. And so making sure that you know what your school is and is not allowed to do when it comes to how they educate you and how they treat you. I work a lot with discrimination within schools and also school discipline. And so just making sure that nobody prevents you from the education that you deserve. And so reading whatever it is you have to read to make sure that you know your rights when it comes to making sure that you get your high school degree and are able to go to college without anyone preventing you from putting any roadblocks in the way.
Absolutely.
That is knowledge you always have to impart, because education is just so pivotal and preventative to a lot of other things that Black and brown kids face down the road. Um, it's so important. And I know all of you are very bright and beautiful lights, and I just can't wait to see what you achieve. And I don't want anyone to be able to dim that. So just making sure you know what's up beforehand.
Absolutely. And that's such a passionate thing. And I always say the same thing. And I'm glad you mentioned that too. In this class, I always have at least one law enforcement person to talk about that very thing about on how to deal with law enforcement officers. So that is something that I think any teen, because, teenagers love to run their mouth. So they, just
Yes.
that's always something I like to hit on at some point. But I do have some really good questions from the students here. I'll get to as many of these as I can.
Yes, please.
I love this first one. This is Levon Johnson. He's in 10th grade, very avid chess player. And he asked, "What is your favorite chess opening?"
Thanks, Levine. What a great question. So for white, I always play the Jogo piano, which is E4, E5, knight F3, knight C6, bishop C4, bishop C5, C3, knight F6, D3, D3. So that opening line, that's what I play for white. And then for black, I play the E6 Sicilian.
You ought to see their reactions to that. That was pretty funny. I think they're writing it down. All right, so this
Good thing
next
it's
one is
recorded.
yeah. Uh, this is Edward Flowers. He's a member of our band. He's the one I mentioned has the business concept about chess. And he asked, through all your struggles with discrimination, sexism, and racism, what are some things you think you need
Mm.
to change within the business world and the chess world?
Oh, that's such a good question. Thank you for asking that, Edward. I think just more appreciation for different views. I think if much more people were accepting of the fact that a Black girl from the hood could play chess and be good at chess, I think that would stop a lot of sexism, and racism. And I think also just putting more money into initiatives in low-income communities that support different after school initiatives. And so, again, it doesn't have to be chess. My sister is now 13 and she's really into computer programming. And that's not something that I had when I was growing up. And so, just putting more money into things that allow kids to expand their horizons, I think would just change the game so much, and just provide for more diverse perspectives and more diverse voices that I think that could add to both the chess and business world greatly.
Yeah, now two things. First of all, remind me, I'm having a coding person from Jersey City tomorrow, and I can get her in contact with your sister. So I'll send you that tomorrow. But you made such a great point there, and I
Yeah,
had
thank
this
you.
conversation. I had this conversation this weekend because you said if to get people to think differently, because there's all these things about DEI, yes or no, and and here's the way I always said it. I said the reason DEI was needed in the first place was because whenever somebody like you or a female or an immigrant or somebody that wasn't white got a job, the first thing people assumed they're in that job because they are XYZ. It was never people could never accept the fact that somebody may be just as smart as them, somebody may can work just as hard as them, and that's why all those policies were needed in the first place. And it had nothing to do with well, it had a lot. It had some to do with socioeconomic, but it was mainly to do with the way people thought, and that was why all that stuff was needed. And that is such a true statement across the board in so many industries.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I like this one. This is Rondell Ellis. He's in 10th grade, and he asked, "What was your biggest motivation to continue your chess journey?"
Oh, wow. That's also a really great question. Thank you, Rondell. I think my biggest motivation were the haters. I don't like being told no, and I don't like being told that I can't do something. And so I chess helped me. Like I said, I used to be very insecure and shy, and chess really helped me gain the confidence to believe in myself and to believe in my self-worth, and to continuously remind myself and ground myself in the knowledge that I'm deserving and that I'm good enough, and that I can do whatever I put myself to. And chess, because chess was such a toxic environment, continuing to put myself in those spaces just helped to um what's the word? Just helped to like continue to remind myself of those things. And then also like being able to travel the world was also a big plus. And
Oh
so
man,
I'm grateful for that. Yeah.
that's awesome. Now, and you've mentioned this a couple of times too, and I'm glad you did because when we get done here in a couple minutes, they're all going to do some presentations, and you have a great YouTube video about how chess and business go hand in hand. And you talked about how it helps you communicate, it
Mhm.
helps you articulate, it
Mhm.
helps you sell. So, obviously all these kids aren't going to be attorneys, but all of them are going to have to be in some type of business at some point. So, how important are those communication skills to be able to get up and speak, walk in a room and introduce yourself, be able to sell a product, sell yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Nobody's going to listen to you if they don't believe what you're saying. And in order for them to believe what you're saying, you have to believe what you're saying. And so it's so important for you to be is in as many different rooms as possible so that you could learn how to talk to different groups of people because not everyone thinks the same way as you do. Not everyone has the same background that you do. But the more spaces that you immerse yourself in, the greater it is you're able to kind of sell products to different people and to think how other people think in order to sell them a product that will be beneficial to them, right? Like if I'm trying to sell you on how to play on ways to play chess, I could say, have you ever been outside of y'all are from Mississippi, right?
Yep.
Have you ever been outside of Mississippi? Do you want to go outside of Mississippi? Chess is a great way for you to get outside of Mississippi. Do you want to meet people from do you want to meet people from all over the world? Chess is a great way to do that. You want to be able to think, move, strategize and think ahead, and plan and organize. Chess helps you develop those skills, right? And I can tell you that because I now have 4 degrees from numerous
Wow.
institutions and I'm now a lawyer. I can tell you these things because I've lived it, right? And so
Wow.
you are your best product.
Incredible. I got time for two more. This is Kamani Wright. He's in ninth grade, one of our power lifters here, state champion power lifters. And
Ooh.
he during the filming of the during the filming of the documentary and during your chess journey in school, did other students doubt you and make fun of you?
Oh yeah. Chess wasn't as cool as it was now. I think I got called a nerd a lot, but I leaned into that. Um, but also, like I said, like in 5 years, are you gonna care what people called you 5 years ago? Probably not. And so, why does it matter in the moment if people make fun of you or if people don't agree with what you want to do with your life? They're not living it. Doesn't make you happy. I think that's all that matters. And so, yeah, I got made fun of, and yeah, it sucked in the moment. But again, look at where I am today. And it's because of people who doubted me and people who didn't think enough of me. And again, I'm grateful for them. I'm also grateful for the people who supported me. Um, yeah, like you just have to believe in yourself and your ability to do whatever it is you put your mind to. That's the most important thing. And have fun doing it.
Love it. All right, I got one more. This is Zayden Reed. She's in ninth grade. And she asked, how do you face the discrimination you still face today in the legal space and in the chess space?
Ooh, Satan. Okay, that's a great question. Um, how do I face? Okay. I think now as an adult, for me, it's important to talk to mentors because they have gone through the same things that I've gone through. And I think the best knowledge comes from our elders. And so for me, it's important to talk with them and to make sure that I'm not overthinking what it is I feel like I've experienced or what's the best way to move forward because I'm still a very junior associate, and I want to make sure that I have a career that lasts and that is impactful. And so for me, that means talking to people who have gone through this so that I know my best way forward. I'm not going to lie to you and say that that's easy. It's definitely easier said than done. Um, but I think just grounding myself in the knowledge that there are people who are smarter than me, that know more than me, and that can guide me in ways that I may not know how to.
Man, I'm telling you, and they all like to make fun of me, which is fine. I mean, that's when you're a teacher, that's what you get. But I just think I always tell them all the time, I was their age at one point. I dealt with a lot of the same things they dealt with. And you have to understand there's people out to get you, but there's a lot of people that are there to help you as well. And recognizing that at a young age is so important. Now, we're almost out of
So
time.
important.
We're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great way to start our semester. But before we go, a couple things. First of all, how close are you to becoming a chess master?
I still have some ways away. I am currently learning how to balance both my career and also chess. I think first and foremost, chess has always been a form of escapism for me. And so I want to make sure that I'm playing when it feels right and not to reach some goal. I should also note that there are some Black girls who have already reached the goal, and so I'm happy for them, and I'm glad that they were able to achieve this just extraordinary journey. And so that means that my journey will come whenever it comes, and I'm not in a rush to achieve it or anything.
Well, you got some kids in Mississippi that are pulling for you now, because I think they've really enjoyed this today.
Thank you guys.
Um, but the last thing before we go, whether somebody wants to be in the legal field or not, whether they want to be in policy, because we've got multiple career paths that these kids have talked about. Why is it so important to understand why they are needed to be skilled and to be talented, not only in communication, not only in business, but in facing every obstacle they're going to face as they become adults?
Because because people don't expect much of Black and brown kids, if for no other reason than for that. And because you have to carry yourself for the people who come after you. You have to uphold yourself to a level so that the people who come after you, the kids who come after you, have an easier way to get there.
Love it.
That's why.
Love it. Well, again, I know you got to get back to work. Thank you so much for putting us in your busy schedule. Rochelle Ballantyne, chess expert, star of Brooklyn Castle, all the way from New York City. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Happy Black History Month, everyone.
That's right. Talk to you soon, buddy. See ya.